We have two distinguished guests here this afternoon. Dr. William Heiser is the principal of North County High School in Anne Arundel County. He is known as an innovative and results-driven leader with expertise in building and positioning school culture and improvement. Dr. Heiser was recently awarded the 2013 Maryland High School Principal of the Year by the Maryland Association of Secondary School Principals. He is bringing his student, Jack Andraka, a sophomore at North County High School, who has recently developed a novel paper sensor to detect pancreatic, ovarian, and lung cancer in 5 minutes for as little as 3 cents. Now, I don't know about you, but at 15 years old, I was just hoping that from Friday to Monday I could remember my locker combination. Jack won the 2012 Intel International Science and Engineering Fair and over $100,000, as well as the Smithsonian American Ingenuity Award. He conducted his research at Johns Hopkins University, and he is also on the National Junior Wildwater Kayaking Team, has won awards at multiple national and international mathematics competitions, enjoys playing with his dog, and folding origami. So please welcome them both to the stage.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to speak to you today. So I hope you've had a wonderful conference and looking at all the presentations and speaking and being, what a welcoming that we received. And so I'd like to thank Julie and her team for what a great job that she's done. So thank you very much. I'm like the opening act, right? And I get that, and I'm good with that. The big, one of the things about, about being with Jack, and also just being a principal in general, is like you have to know when to get out of the way, right? And so I'm going to open up for Jack, and then you're going to have to be able to hear really an amazing talk by a student that is really once-in-a-lifetime kind of student that you'll come across, and equally just a wonderful young man. So before we get into really Jack's innovations, I think it's important to just think about school culture, and each of you are in an institution or an organization to think about those kinds of things. And then I want to just take about probably 7 minutes to share the journey at North County High School to give you an idea of the context at which we work and at which Jack studies part of the time there. But let me propose a few questions for you. How do you turn around an underperforming student? How do you turn around an underperforming level or content area? How do you turn around an entire school? How do you turn around a district? How do you turn around an entire community? Think about a strategy that you would use with one student and multiply it out over time so that you can use those skills and strategies to impact the entire culture. Now, you've thought of that one thing, and I'd just like to ask you one question is, where were you 3 years ago when I got this position as principal? I could have used you all. The fact is that there's no magic solution, but there are some best practices, all of which you've talked talked with colleagues this afternoon about and this morning. And it's just my only hope just to give you a few strategies that we used that are really, in my mind, a lot of common sense kinds of strategies. Let me paint the picture of North County High School. We're one of 12 public high schools in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. We enroll students from Glen Burnie, Brooklyn Park, and Linthicum. There are approximately 1,800 students or so, grades 9 through 12, in a diverse student body. Our communities border Baltimore City and Baltimore County. And over the past decade, while there's a really strong sense of pride in our communities, it's changed quite a bit. And some of our families have been affected by high unemployment rates, substance abuse, and crime, all of which sometimes impact learning. Many of our students work part-time to help support their families, and approximately 40% are living in poverty. We opened our doors in 1990 after 2 high schools merged, Andover High School and Brooklyn Park High School, when they experienced declining enrollments and became home of the Knights. So 4 years ago, by all accounts, North County was an underperforming school. There were a growing number of students that were chronically late to class. Student fights were the norm every single day. Failing was pervasive across all grade levels. And students weren't enrolling in rigorous courses. The teachers at that time, from what I understand, were very worn out, tired, frustrated, and felt like they weren't really listened to. There wasn't much collaboration among the staff. Certainly there wasn't any between administration or teachers. As I mentioned, student participation in advanced level courses and college entrance exams for the school system was the lowest out of all 12. Unfortunately, something had occurred there, and the culture had really created low expectations, marginal achievement, and a no-go to college culture. And so in 2010, the superintendent, Dr. Kevin Maxwell, selected me to take over North County High School. And so for 3 years, we've been leading the transformation to empower every student, every teacher, administrator, and parent, and to use Jim Collins' word, to go from good to great. Well, how do you do that? Where do you start? And I would say it's no different in any one of your programs or any one of your classrooms. The first thing I did was I took time to listen and learn before I led. That was number one. I took several months and I met with students, current and former, students that had dropped out, students that have succeeded. I wanted to find out what their solutions were or what their drawbacks were. I had to learn about the strengths and weaknesses, and you've all been through graduate programs, opportunities and threats. I did a casebook study on the school, and I learned about all the data that you could ever imagine. But most of all, I spent time observing the behaviors and routines and what took place, not only in hallways and those kinds of spaces, but what took place inside the classroom, where the rubber meets the road. It became very clear to me that the kids were as frustrated as the teachers, but they weren't on the same page. They all wanted to be great, and if they were mediocre or poor at that time, they all wanted to at least strive to be good. So I saw a school with low expectations, but I saw a collective strength among all the constituents. And so how could I bring out each person's strengths? I needed to create a sense of urgency, belief, and high expectations. Those were things that I had to do, and you hear those buzzwords all the time, but you have to live it and breathe it. If people don't know that there's a problem, if they don't know that kids are having difficult time and failing at algebra year after year after year, something has to change. Whether it be the schedule, whether it be how we offer things, whether it be extending our day and the supports, how we introduce technology. There are lots of things that we need to do to maximize the greatness of every student. I did a cultural and performance audit on my own. This was an opportunity not to play the blame game, right? You've heard about the blame that takes place from the high school to the middle school, from the middle school to the elementary to the parent, right? If I started much higher, our four-year universities blame the high school or blame the community college, right? Or the community college sometimes will say, man, they're just not being prepared. The fact of the matter is there's a lot of variables in order to make kids great. So creating that belief and expectation was something that we had to do in North County. I knew that we could be successful, and I made sure that we collaborated and worked together. I do want to talk to you about a third strata that we used, and I'm going to jump through this pretty quickly, but you can never underestimate the personalization of a learning environment. You know, I've sat and we've talked about kids and how challenging they are, and they're challenging, right? They're absolutely challenging, particularly sometimes in areas of STEM. There's no doubt about it. The one thing that you can never underestimate is the encouragement and the verbal encouragement that you give students every single day, and to count on your small rewards. and your small successes and small wins. Sometimes we look for the big wins, and I tell you what, when I walk into a school of 2,000 people, and on the first day, what seems like a little bit chaotic to me, and I needed to get it under control, I need to count on small wins. And I need to determine what those wins look like. It's no different in each of your classrooms at each of your universities. We focused on a couple different things in order to change the environment. The first was customer service. CSM is a great school. One of the reasons I know it's a great school is because as soon as we walked in, I felt a welcoming environment. And the question is not if that welcoming environment exists in your room or in your school or your college, but does it exist next to you? And does it exist in the faculty lounge? And does it exist at the water cooler and all the side conversations? Because every conversation has to be about the success of kids. I looked at routines and habits, how we did business in the main office. I looked at the academic interventions and support for kids and increased those over time. There are lots of things being placed on the plates of teachers and assistant professors that are not what I would call non-instructional duties. And so when I looked at that to get a small win with my faculty was to remove every single barrier other than teaching and learning from their plate. And so sometimes in high schools you'll walk in and teachers may have a non-instructional duty where they have to supervise a particular place. We didn't need that. Teachers are trained to teach and to help kids learn. And so we increased the academic interventions. We increased the number of extracurricular activities that took place in the academic science competitions and math competitions so that teachers felt committed to those things and not burdened by the other things. Over time, the behaviors started to change with kids, and our referral rate and suspension rates drastically reduced, cut in half. But I still had to figure out over time who was on board with the culture shift. And so the fourth strategy I would say would be to define the non-negotiable leadership attributes of everybody in the building. What attributes and behaviors do teachers, counselors, administrators have in your building? And you see them every day, usually with their actions. And throughout the change process, I developed these non-negotiable leadership attributes that were essential for every single member in the organization. I knew exactly what I was looking for as staff rolled over as it does, whether people are transferring or whether we're getting retirements. The question for me is, I absolutely unconditionally want people with high content knowledge. There's no question. You can't replace that. But there's some other things that I needed characteristics to be outliers. I need teachers that are highly caring, off the chart caring, love kids and want them to be so successful that they go home exhausted every single day. And you know the feeling. I got a lot of people like that in this room, I can tell. I also wanted a trait that was called the achievement trait, and that's high achieving. They're high achieving, and they also want other students and their people in their class to be off the chart achieving. So when they experience someone like an extreme outlier in success, like a Jack Andraka, they're off the chart excited about his success. And it's contagious, and it ripples through the school. The other trait I was looking for, which is really unique, I was looking for innovators. I needed teachers that believed in innovation and wanted to do things differently because they had a principle that while I follow the rules, there are some things that I bend a little bit. And I needed people to be innovative and excited to get kids because I knew where we were taking our STEM magnet program and every other student in that building, and that was to be innovative. And the last thing is that I needed them to be change-oriented. We were going to go through a major culture shift over the next 3 years, and we did. And I needed them to make sure that they could adjust to change because I was moving a lot of cheese. Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, talks about getting the right people on the bus. We had to determine who were the right people. It's not just teachers. There are administrators that weren't the right people on the bus, right? I had to make sure our custodians were the right people on the bus. Everybody through the entire organization. It wasn't about what position someone had. We don't have positions, we have responsibilities and roles. That's one thing we talk a lot about at our high school. And during those interviews, I listened, and I was looking for those characteristics that I mentioned. I give you one example of the high caring, high achievement kind of situation. I hired a guidance counselor, and we were looking for that obviously high caring, a guidance counselor position, school counselor. But I also wanted somebody that was high achievement and also forward planning. Our guidance counselor worked for 6 weeks with a student to help her perfect and edit essays that she had written for the Gates Millennium Scholarship. Very prestigious, only 1,000 named in the country. Our school had never had one. The student, I don't want to go into real detail about the story, but the student had been through so much, a great deal. Split from her father, walked to a courthouse, leaving an abuse situation, walked to the courthouse, was able to get to live with her mother, works so hard, works jobs, lives in poverty. Those aren't the things that define her. She's super, super smart and super innovative and super great. Jack knows her, and she's a great young lady. This afternoon, we've been waiting on pins and needle because there'll be a press release from our school system that she won the Gates Millennium Scholarship. It started with a belief, it started with high caring, it started with exhaustion. From that one counselor, supportive teachers, into the night those things are done, and it ended with tears of joy from that counselor and student. The last strategy I want to mention, and that's the fifth, is to provide an academic vision for all stakeholders. This isn't just an ivory tower kind of thing. If you're going to transform your school, everyone needs to know where you're going. If you're going to transform your classroom or your program, everybody needs to know exactly what your academic vision is. Our vision was simple, to transform our school into a learning college, using the words of Terry O'Banion. I wanted open access to college-level courses that weren't time-bound or place-bound. So we opened up our AP program, and we increased that by 3 times, probably the fastest growth in the country in regard to AP participation. Many, of course, thought that, wow, if you're going to increase it that much and open up to kids that aren't prepared, is what I heard, is that your data is going to go down, your results are going to go down. The results didn't go down. The academic achievement stayed the same. We wanted to go up even more. We've increased interventions to support first-time test takers. The other thing we've done is we've brought the community college into North County High School. So Anne Arundel Community College we are a campus of AACC. That was really important for our community for 2 reasons. Our students need quick access to college-level courses. I needed something to compete with that AP program, and I found it. And I found a great community college that was very willing. And so now we're enrolling sections and sections of students into community college courses. It's fantastic. The other thing I needed to do, though, is because we are a community high school, I look at our high school like I look at a community college. And that's how I run it. It's open access, and our mission is really broad. That probably comes from my training when I went through Morgan State's Community College Leadership Program back in 2003, which was a great experience. The last thing that we did, which was really, really important, and I can't stress this enough, students need experiences outside of the classroom, beyond the traditional field trip that's likely very boring for students. We started academic competition clubs, and we started something called TSA, the Technology Student Association. And we have 3 students going to nationals. We have an engineering challenge that students participate in. Anything that our teachers or students can identify as an academic challenge within STEM or any other area, we embrace it and we want to do it. I think I'm a moderator to 3 clubs, And quite honestly, all that means is I have no expertise in any of those areas. I do what I did with Jack. I get out of the way, and I find resources to help students. And I find mentors to help students. It's very important to have that collaborative relationship. There are some things we did around the SAT and improving a college culture, and I will say this. This is a beautiful site and clearly a new campus. Not all buildings are like this. If I walk into a classroom, they may be dingy, run down. And without bringing down any particular school or college, there are buildings that need to be drastically upgraded. But there are things that you can do. There are things that you can do to brighten it up and welcome the place and get kids to want to learn in that environment. In addition to being innovative, one needs to be flexible. Highly, highly flexible. Because when you're working with a student such as Jack Andraka, and not all kids are like Jack Andraka, I know, but we have smart kids that want to do a lot of different things. They want to take an IB course at Old Mill High School, then they want to go over to the community college, they want to sit for an elective at our school, right? And then they'd like to come back for our evening high school program, which was new that we started, or do a hybrid course with the community college, or they want to do a distance learning. You've got to be flexible. Too often kids are hearing no, particularly in the K through 12 arena. Oftentimes the answer is no. My answer's been yes, and I'll tell you this, it's paid off. It's not to say that we're a perfect school by any means. Every day is a challenge. Every day is a challenge. But the rewards are great. And I've been very blessed to have students such as Jack and all the kids that he collaborates with, and the future's bright for us. I have no doubt about it. You have a chance in just a moment to sit and listen to Jack Andraka. And you heard his bio. His bio really doesn't say it all. There are many YouTube videos that you can go and take a look at, and I encourage you to do that. The fact of the matter is, his story is a great one. And the fact that Jack flies out for Greece this evening, it got moved up a little bit, so like at 2 o'clock I think we got to roll out of here. Jack is so committed to STEM, and Jack's family is so committed to STEM, and the academic competitions and trying new things around science fair competitions, that it's contagious. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me to even have a student like Jack Andraka. So I'm very fortunate, and I'm obviously very motivated. And with that, Jack, come on up. You're the main speaker.
Have you ever experienced a moment in your life that was so painful and confusing that all you wanted to do was learn as much as possible to make sense of it all? When I was 13, a close family friend, who was like an uncle to me, passed away from pancreatic cancer. Oh dear. Is it on? Oh no, it's not on. Is it on now? Oh, there we go. And so when my uncle passed away and the disease had hit so close to home, I knew I needed to learn more. So I went online to find answers. And using the internet, I found a variety of statistics on pancreatic cancer. And what I had found shocked me. Over 85% of all pancreatic cancers are diagnosed late, when someone has less than a 2% chance of survival. Why are we so bad at detecting pancreatic cancer? The reason our current modern medicine is a 60-year-old technique. I mean, that's older than my dad. But also, it's extremely expensive, costing $800, and grossly inaccurate, missing 30% of all pancreatic cancers. This means that your doctor rarely orders this test, and pancreatic cancers are typically diagnosed late. Learning this, I was sure there had to be a better way. So I formed a scientific criteria as to what a sensor would have to look like. And essentially I said it would have to be simple, rapid, sensitive, selective, inexpensive, and minimally invasive. Now, there's a reason why this sensor hasn't been updated in over 6 decades. And that's because when we're looking for pancreatic cancer, we're looking for the protein in your bloodstream that's found at these very high levels. And the reason why this is so hard is because that protein is similar to a lot of other proteins that are found in your bloodstream. And so it's kind of like looking for a needle in a stack of nearly identical needles, because you have these liters and liters of blood, and it's next to impossible. However, undeterred due to my teenage optimism, I went to my best friends, as most high schoolers would, for knowledge, Wikipedia and Google how I get through every high school quiz. And essentially what happened is I found a database of over 8,000 different proteins that are found in your bloodstream when you have pancreatic cancer. And I just began going through this database, and finally, on the 4,000th try, I found a protein that might work. Its name was mesothelin, and it's just your ordinary run-of-the-mill type protein, unless you have pancreatic, ovarian, and lung cancer, in which case it's found at these very high levels in your bloodstream. But in addition, it's found in the earliest stages of the disease, when someone has close to 100% chance of survival. So now that I had found a reliable protein to detect, I shifted my focus from finding a protein to actually detecting that protein, and thus the presence of pancreatic cancer. And my breakthrough came in the most unlikely of places, my high school biology class. For me, a stifler of innovation, but not to insult any of you guys out there. But essentially, I had snuck in an article on these things called single-walled carbon nanotubes, essentially long, thin pipes of carbon that are an atom thick and 1/50,000th the diameter of your hair. But despite their small size, they have these incredible properties. They're kind of like the superheroes of material science. And so I was reading this article under my desk sneakily, and as any high schooler would. And essentially, we were learning about these things called antibodies. Essentially, these amazing molecules that only react with one specific protein. And I was sitting in biology class when suddenly it hit me. What we were learning about antibodies and what I was reading about carbon nanotubes could be combined. Essentially, you take the antibody and you lace it into a network of these carbon nanotubes, such that you have a network that only reacts with one specific protein. But due to the properties of carbon nanotubes, this network will change its electrical properties based on the amount of protein present, and thus I could detect pancreatic cancer from this. However, there's one catch. These networks of carbon nanotubes are extremely flimsy, and since they're so delicate, they need to be supported. So that's why I chose to use paper. Essentially, making a paper sensor for pancreatic cancer is about as simple as making chocolate chip cookies, which I love. You start with some water, pour in some nanotubes, add some antibodies, mix it up, take some paper, dip it, dry it, and you can detect cancer. But then it dawned on me. I couldn't do this on my kitchen countertop. I mean, my mom had endured a lot. Like, I had cultured E. coli where we could make sandwiches and grown. And me and my brother made, like, some liquid explosives in the basement which she wasn't too comfortable about. We had to get rid of that later, but. So I needed a lab, and so I contacted about 200 different professors at Johns Hopkins University and the National Institutes of Health. Essentially anyone that had anything to do with pancreatic cancer. I sent off emails that include my budget, my timeline, procedure, materials list. Then I sat back waiting for the positive emails to pour in. Then reality took hold. And over the course of a month, I got 199 rejections. Some professors even going as far as to say why each and every step in my entire procedure was wrong. Figured some of the professors at Johns Hopkins weren't nearly as nice as I thought they were. I mean, they look really nice in their picture, but then their responses not so much. And however, out of those 200 professors, I finally got one maybe from Dr. Andraka at Johns Hopkins University. And essentially, 3 months later, I go into his lab armed with these giant blue ring binders full of 500-plus journal articles, go in, and I sit down, and I start talking, and then he sees the PhD pass by, and he's like, come in here. And then he keeps calling him more and more, and then there's a sizable posse of them, and they start firing the questions. And they're just firing these questions rapid fire at me, trying to sink my procedure. We find a hole in my knowledge. But I answered them all correctly. I guessed on quite a few of them. I always guess C, like I do on my SATs. But I answered them all right. And I finally got the lab space I needed. And so I then started, and as soon as I started, I realized how inept I am at working in a lab at first. I tripped and dropped my cells everywhere, and then I blew them up in the centrifuge, and I sneezed in them. My professor wasn't very pleased with that, but eventually I got through it. And then I began realizing my lab procedure wasn't as great as I had initially thought. However, over the course of 7 long months, I slowly filled each and every one of those holes. And eventually I ended up with one small paper sensor that costs 3 cents and takes 5 minutes to run. This makes it 168 times faster, over 26,000 times less expensive, and over 400 times more sensitive than other forms for pancreatic cancer detection. But also, one of the coolest parts is that it can detect it in the earliest stages, when someone has close to 100% chance of survival, and it is 100% accuracy. So in the next 2 to 5 years, this patent-pending sensor could potentially lift the once dismal pancreatic cancer survival rates from 5.5% to close to 100%. And it would do similar for ovarian and lung cancer in my preliminary studies. But it wouldn't stop there. By changing out that antibody, which is pretty simple, you can detect an entirely different protein, and thus an entirely different disease. So the sensor could potentially serve as a platform to detect any disease, ranging from heart disease to Alzheimer's, other forms of cancer, even HIV/AIDS. So my hope for this sensor is that one day we can all have that one extra moment with that uncle, that relative, that mother, father, sister, brother. And through this, I've learned a very important lesson, that with the internet, anything is possible. But I kind of knew that before. Theories can be shared, and you don't have to be a professor with multiple degrees to have your ideas valued. It's a neutral space where what you look like, age, or gender doesn't really matter. It doesn't apply. It's just your ideas that count. So instead of posting duck-faced pictures on your Facebook or taking pictures of your food and putting them on Instagram, you could be changing the world. So if a 15-year-old who didn't really know what a pancreas was at the beginning of this could find a new way to detect pancreatic cancer, just imagine what you could do. Thank you.